What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? With 1.4 dropping, we got a brand new game mode called Aetherium Wars. And this new game mode is very fun and engaging. However, some of the end game content for the event has been putting some players through the ringer. However, there are some builds and team compositions we can make in order to not lose a single battle a single time and clear the entire game mode in one single day, only even a couple of hours worth of time. I'm not even kidding. I went live last night and chat said, here, try these things, and we ended up creating a build that literally cleared the entire game mode without losing a single battle. Every single part of the game mode, all the rewards, everything in one single go. So I'm going to show you what chat showed me. They gave me a guide this time around, and I'm going to give it to you. So let's get into it. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the team composition here we're going to be using for this build. You can see we have a pretty good damage spread for the different damage types we're going to be using here. And it's funny because you get these Pokemon, oh my god, I'm sorry, you get these Ether Spirits, like 75% of this entire team you pick up in like the first 15 minutes of this game mode. You get the Trotter like literally right away. You get Silvermane Cannoneer in the first like 5-10 minutes, and you get the Imaginary Weaver, I believe, before you even leave the first realm. The only one here that's harder to acquire is this gold tier Pokemon, Aurumaton Gatekeeper. You get him once you leave, I believe, you get him in the third realm, if I'm not mistaken. And in the first realm, this is the gold tier that you can use. It's the, let's see here, it's the Blaze Out of Space. You get him and you can totally let him carry you for the entire first realm. If you want to, you can totally switch to the Silvermane Lieutenant for the second realm. And then, like I said, by the end of the third realm, you'll end up getting the Aurumaton. And these first three that you get are actually really great gold tier Ether Spirits. But once you get the Aurumaton, I recommend switching to him because he's really strong. And you can see here we have a really good damage spread. We have all three elements being represented here, so no matter what team you come up against, you will be able to clear it as long as you play properly in combat and lean into what's good and you have a good strategy for the combat. You do need a little bit of combat awareness to clear the entire event without losing a single battle, but you can do it because I'm an idiot and I was able to do it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the builds for each individual Pokemon here. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at the expansion potato chips that we're going to be using for the build here. You can see that we have the Deep Clean, we have Functional Overdraft, we have Attack Interception, and Efficiency Optimization. Just be aware when you start off in this game mode, you won't be able to use all four of these on the Trotter right away. You'll have to level up the Pokemon, the Ether Spirits, whatever you want to call them, in order to be able to use all four of these. As you go, you'll get some of these. You might not have all of these expansion chips right away. As you clear the different areas, you will be able to get these. And I believe once you get out of, I believe it's like at realm 3 or whatever, you'll probably have access to all of these, except for the last slot. You'll have to fill that out once you finish the last realm. That's just kind of how it works. And the cool thing about this is depending on which character you use, you only even get 2 options anyway, so it's a lot easier to build some of these Pokemon that we are using. The tougher one to build is basically the Trotter, because by the end he's able to use 4 different chips, which makes the Trotter kind of broken. Honestly, he's the backbone of the entire team, which is why we're going to talk about him first. So, Deep Clean at the end of the turn, it removes all debuffs from the wearer and removes 1 debuff from each of the other allies. This is incredibly powerful because you are getting debuffed a lot in these game modes. A lot of the enemies will be putting DOTs on you, and DOTs are considered debuffs. Functional Overdraft, after attacking an enemy, it consumes HP equal to 25% of the wearer's max HP and advances forward the wearer's action by 40%. If the current HP is insufficient, the wearer's HP will be reduced to 1. So this is kind of like I believe chat was calling this particular Trotter setup the Locha Trotter because he heals a ton. And if you play him properly in battle, there are some really awesome synergies that he will have. So this This attack, when he attacks, he takes 25% of his own HP in order to get this advancement forward. But the cool thing about Trotter is with the right setup here, he actually can have a 100% uptime on his ult. So that 25% that he loses is actually more like 5%, because he'll literally be healing himself every time he attacks with a 100% uptime on his ult. So this doesn't really matter at all. The downside to this is completely negated with the build, because it gives him an advancement forward, giving him an extra attack, and so he's basically going to be constantly healing the team pretty much all of the time. And at the end of the wearer's so attack interception here, at the end of the wearer's action, they gain a barrier that nullifies all damage received except DOTs. Just so you guys know, this attack interception has come in handy plenty of times and plenty of moments for me. Personally, it's actually really, really strong, because sometimes they're not even trying to attack your Trotter. They're trying to attack a different one of your allies, and that it's an AoE attack, and it ends up being about to kill your Trotter, but then he doesn't take the damage. So it's pretty darn good. After entering battle, it reduces the energy required for the ultimate by 1, and the energy cannot be reduced below 2 points. This efficiency optimization is very important for the build, because this is part of how you keep a 100% uptime on his ultimate, because his ultimate lets you use it for 2 turns, and so that means that every time he gets his ultimate, he can pop it, because he's going to get advanced forward, and he's going to have 2 uses of it. So once you pop his ult, he's going to have a 100% uptime of his ult once you start this engine. It's really, really strong. This is the backbone of your entire team. This is basically why you can't die, because you're constantly getting healed by your Trotter. Every once in a while at the very start of battle, you may need to potentially use your heal one time, but every other time you basically get to do an AoE attack that also heals the entire rest of your team. Trotter go boom. Now this is the next dude I want to talk about, because this is your main, like, arguably your main damage unit. This dude is a hoss, okay? This build I actually kind of found out on my own by accident while we were, making the builds, and it turns out that it's really powerful. We're going to use high load, low speed, increases the attack by 90% and reduces the speed by 30%. So he is a little bit slower, but when he finally attacks, he's going off. And he puts out the little fish, and the little fish put DOTs out themselves, and I don't believe they're the ones getting slowed down. And it doesn't really matter, because the other 2 members of your team are going to be putting out damage in front of him, and then when he gets to go off, he just gets to like kind of finish off enemies and slow them down, kind of evening the playing field a bit. And you can see here with general upgrade, which is like the first upgrade you pretty much get from this game mode, so you get to immediately slap this on somebody for a while and then switch it over to him once you get him. It increases the attack by 20% and max HP by 20%. He arguably doesn't even need the 20% HP, but it does keep him a little bit safer if they decide to like hyper focus on him for whatever reason. So you have 110% attack on this dude, and he's already dealing a ton of damage. And at sudden interjection, after using a basic attack skill ultimate for the first time, it immediately gains an additional turn. So the way you want this to work, and I'll show you in a minute how this works. If you can, you want to ult with this guy like very, very early on in the battle, which will give him an extra attack, and his ult slows the enemy, does a ton of damage, and he gets to do it again. And he has 110% attack, so this dude is going to immediately crack off. Your team should deal like almost half the enemy's entire health in one single go. So let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the team, because this dude's pretty easy to build. He just works really well. The Silvermane Cannoneer, the little Chad gunner guy, this is super easy. Saturated activation. When the wearer's first turn begins, immediately regenerates 3 energy. This is really, really good, because this can essentially gives an ult to your other to this man's over here, because the Cannoneer's ult, basically you can use it on the Aurumaton, giving him 2 skill points, and he usually gets to use his ult. So a lot of starter battles get to start out by using Silvermane Cannoneer. He ults, this man ults, and then you use Cannoneer to buff this man's, and then you just start attacking the crap out of the enemies, and they're like basically already half dead before they even have a single turn. Now let's look at the other piece we're using on him. Backstage enhancement. When it is not the wearer's turn, the wearer increases their attack by 50%. That's really important, because he's going to be attacking when it's not his turn a lot. You can use his skill on either the Imaginary Weaver or the Aurumaton Gatekeeper. However, because we slowed the speed of the Aurumaton Gatekeeper, unfortunately, he's a little bit slower than we want him to be. So I like using the skill from the Cannoneer on the Weaver. That way we get a little bit of AoE damage out early. It tends to work out really, really well. You can put it on Aurumaton, but some enemies will actually DPS you down first before you them if you go with that strat. It just kind of depends on whether you're tanky enough to survive it depending on the battle. Now let's move on to the Imaginary Weaver. Malfunction is what we're going to be using on it. When the wearer attacks a debuffed enemy, they deal additional damage equal to 50% of their attack to the enemy. And the other one we're going to be using is Parallel Enhancement. After using an attack, it increases the damage received by the wearer and the attacked enemy target by 25% for 2 turns. This is pretty solid. You'll see in combat how this actually works. You might not even really notice that it's working as well as it is. The Weaver gets to attack like 2 times pretty much back to back. And because of that, that also means that the Silvermane Cannoneer gets to have 2 follow-ups basically back to back, meaning that he'll have 50% extra attack boost whenever that happens. And the cool thing about this is they have 2 different damage types. So even if if the enemy is actually not weak to one of them, that means that they're probably going to be weak to the other. So there's pretty much no downside to this, because you're pretty much going to always get a pretty solid attack on the enemy no matter what the situation is, because you'll get like 4 attacks in a row because of this particular combo. Now let's go ahead and look at some combat so that you guys can see how to potentially use these guys in battle to optimize your gameplay to the fullest, because just having a good build doesn't necessarily mean you're clearing the content. You still have to play them correctly. Before we take a look at some gameplay, just some very quick tips here that will save you so much time and energy, and it's so headache free. It'll save you so much time, it's not even funny. Don't touch any of these hyperlink matches at the start. Don't fight any of these dudes yet, okay? Clear the victory zones first, clear the championship first, then come do the hyperlink matches, and you can clear all of these, I'm not kidding, back to back to back in like maybe 30 minutes or so, and you don't need any of these rewards in order to make the build that I showed you. Most of these are just data upgrade data anyway, so you really, really don't need to fight these people at the start. You can clear them afterwards super duper quick. It's not even funny how easy it is. Just clear the victory zones first. And when you are in combat, you want to defeat the mobs first most of the time. The less enemies there are, the less damage you will in the end be taking, and then you can hyper focus on the bosses after. There are some exceptions where you may, because you're going to be doing a lot of AoE or blast damage most of the time, and there are some exemptions where you will be hitting the boss some of the time, because the enemies you want to DPS down are actually on the sides of the boss, and the blast damage will hit both of them. There are exceptions to this. Sometimes you might want to hit the enemies that are robots that explode, for example. It really just depends on the situation. Sometimes you might want to deviate from the normal game plan just a little bit because of some of the enemies that you are going up against. For example, if some of the enemies are not weak to you, you may want to take care of some of the enemies that are weak to you first. Again, mobs first, then boss in most cases. Sometimes you do want to aim your blast damage at the boss because you have 2 enemies on the sides you're actually trying to hit, and while you take care of them, you kind of do some damage to the boss as well. So let's take a look at some gameplay. So this team build is actually so strong that you'll find at the end of a lot of battles, you can actually hit your basic attack repeatedly, giving you your ult back really, really fast for the next battle. And you'll see here that we use the Automaton's ult first, then the Cannoneers after, pretty much giving the Automaton 2 skill points and almost his entire ult back right away. Now we're going to hyper focus on the right side here because they are somewhat weak to the elements that we use, and the one boss on the right has less HP and less defense than the boss on the left. We want to take out the mobs first and as many enemies as we can quickly. So we're going to spread the love a little bit here. We're going to get the slow, and we're going to get a little bit damage out on that mob on the end, and then AoE everything down. Just AoE everything down. And because it's blast damage, the boss on the left will actually end up taking some damage as well, potentially giving us the opportunity to hyper focus the next boss after. Now we're going to use the skill from the Cannoneer on the Imaginary Weaver, and the reason for that is because the Weaver is a little bit faster than the Automaton. You technically get more damage if you use it on the Automaton because he's slower. It's actually better to use it on the Weaver because the Weaver will come out a little bit more early. You'll see that we end up actually taking out both enemies on the right before the Automaton would have really been able to capitalize with the combo from the Cannoneer. And with our Trotter, we want to pretty much always keep a 100% uptime with his ult, which we get basically free because of our build. So you want to preemptively use his ult and then just use his AoE attack every single time. You'll be healing and dealing a little bit of damage every single time because of that. And once you've used the Cannoneer's skill one time on the Weaver, the next time he gets to attack, you don't have to worry about using the skill because the skill is still active. You don't want to actually use the skill because it'll change the skill's uptime. So you just want to use his normal attack, which will deal yet more AoE. And as you can see, we very easily took care of the mob on the end because we only used one strong attack on him, and then we hyper-focused everything else on AoE on the other main boss. Now, the entire right side enemies are all completely gone. Now we can pretty much hyper-focus on the main boss, but because we're going to continue to use AoE, that mob on the far left is going to end up basically getting defeated just by accident because we're AoEing down the main one so much that the blast damage is going to end up taking out the mob on the left. You can see our Trotter is the one who ended up taking down the mob on the left. So with this build and with some combat awareness, we can very, very easily take out these enemies. I have an ult with the Weaver. I have an ult with the Cannoneer still right here in front of us here, and I don't even need to use them because we're doing so much damage. We're just clearing this so easily. As you can see in the championship, this is actually the final hyperlink match in the entire mode. If we were fighting the championship match, which I unfortunately didn't record, you would have seen that just there, what you were looking at, we still had all our ults available. We had like basically full health. When that second mob comes out, we're just in the exact same scenario we were in when we started this particular hyperlink match. You just rinse and repeat and take everything out, DPS everything down with AoE, hyper focus on the mobs first. It's easy, fam. Anyways, if you found this video helpful or entertaining in any way, shape, or form, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.